Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're decoding an absolute masterclass in psychological terror and looming threat, straight out of an ancient text. We're looking at a specific chapter of the Mahabharata, but the raw human emotion we're breaking down here, that paralyzing, suffocating anatomy of dread, is something every leader, or really anyone who's ever watched a bad decision finally catch up with them, is going to immediately recognize. We're going to break down exactly how fear entirely takes over the mind of a ruler.
Okay, let's dive into this. My wretched sons are indeed all doomed. Just think about the sheer weight of those words for a second. This isn't some general surveying a battlefield after a crushing loss. No, this is a father and a king accepting total, catastrophic defeat before a single arrow has even been fired. It is a stunning, visceral admission of absolute hopelessness. Section 1. The King's Despair, a father's terrible realization. So King Dhritarashtra is in a state of sheer anxiety after hearing from the great Rishi Dwayapayana all about Arjuna's incredible, mind-blowing feats up in Indra's heavenly abode.
And now he's confessing his deepest, darkest fears to his charioteer, Sanjaya. He actually calls the path his sons are pursuing a policy of the most vulgar kind. There's a really profound psychological insight here, right? The dread is so overwhelmingly heavy because he knows, deep down, that his own side is the villain. He knows his son's wicked path is literally going to depopulate the earth, and knowing you brought that catastrophe on yourself, knowing you've actively paved the road to your own ruin, well, that is the ultimate human nightmare. Section 2. Arjuna, the unstoppable force, building the ultimate threat. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the actual source of all this dread. We're talking about Arjuna, a warrior who is, in the king's mind, completely beyond death and decay.
Listen, you simply cannot talk about Arjuna without talking about his legendary weapon, the Gandiva. This is a devastating bow capable of scattering barbed, sharp-pointed arrows whetted on stone. King Dhritarashtra explicitly states that he reflects on this specific weapon day and night. He literally can't even sleep. It's that classic psychological symptom of anxiety, fixating on one single terrifying detail that represents your ultimate downfall. Fun fact about anxiety, our brains are actually hardwired to obsess over the specific instrument of a perceived threat, just rehearsing the worst-case scenario on an endless mental loop. For the king, the Gandiva just creates this total, unyielding psychological grip on his mind.
But it's not just the weapon causing this terror. It's the guy's resume. Take the Rajasuya, for example. This was the great occasion where Arjuna vanquished all monarchs of the earth. The king remembers this history vividly. He remembers how Arjuna gratified the fire god Agni at Gandiva, and how he just utterly dominated the Rajasuya. This historical lore is absolute proof to the king that Arjuna simply cannot be vanquished by mortal men. He isn't just a skilled rival anymore, guys. He has become this flawless, unstoppable cosmic force of nature.
Section 3. The Flawed Defenders. An Anatomy of Failure. Knowing this unstoppable force he's up against, King Dhritarashtra transitions into a really harsh but totally realistic assessment of his own forces. He knows even his greatest heroes wouldn't want sovereignty of the world if it was purchased by defeat.
But let's walk through his honest evaluation here, because it shows a heartbreaking lack of faith in his ultimate defense. He looks at the mighty Karna and sees someone who is kind, sure, but forgetful. He looks at his great preceptor Drona and sees a man who is simply old. He looks at Bhishma and sees someone bound for massive calamity without any hope of success. It's a brutal breakdown of exactly why he believes his top commanders are totally doomed against the wielder of the Gandiva.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core of his panic. You have his defenders on one side, entirely compromised, old, kind, forgetful, and standing directly against them is Arjuna, wrathful, strong, proud, possessing firm and steady prowess. It is a terrifying mismatch, both in psychological and physical readiness for battle. When you see this stark contrast, you can see exactly why the king is spiraling into a total mental collapse.
Section 4. The Inevitable Doom. Visions of Annihilation. This brings us into the final, absolute darkest phase of the king's monologue, where he realizes peace will only be restored by total destruction or the death of Falguna, that's Arjuna.
But he acknowledges a terrifying truth immediately. The slayer of Arjuna just doesn't exist. To express this inescapable doom, the king rapid fires these insane apocalyptic metaphors. Arjuna's arrows are a mountain-shattering thunderbolt that leaves absolutely no trace behind. They are the literal rays of the sun scorching the entire universe.
He actually calls Arjuna an all-consuming destroyer created by the creator god Vathatri, vomiting and swarming swarms of arrows. This evocative language builds so much immense narrative momentum, really helping us visualize the sheer, suffocating scale of this epic threat. So what's the ultimate result of all this psychological weight? The Chamas of the Bharatas are already broken. The Chamas, the armies of his family, are, in the king's mind, already psychologically shattered. He pictures them breaking and fleeing in all directions just by the imagined clatter of Arjuna's chariot wheels. I mean, the battle hasn't even started, yet the war is entirely lost in the mind. And so, a single, haunting, desperate question remains from the king. Who is there that will defeat him? He asks this knowing full well the answer is absolutely nobody. It perfectly encapsulates the inescapable nature of his doom. When you face an unstoppable force and you know your own defenses are fundamentally flawed, this is what the anatomy of dread looks like. It is a complete psychological surrender. Which really makes you wonder, when we face our own inevitable failures or overwhelming challenges in life, do we step up to fight the unwinnable battle, or does the war end in our minds before we even step onto the field? Thanks for joining me in this explainer, and we'll catch you next time.